The Virtual Boy was a console I never fully expected to actually add to my collection. I'd always been intrigued by it, as the one truly failed Nintendo console. Its mystique increased since its strange binocular-like design made it hard to share gameplay footage online. But when it came to actually getting one, there was always some reason not to. The two biggest being its price in the secondhand market, and the other being its eye-searing red LED display, which infamously caused headaches and is often cited as the biggest reason for the Virtual Boy's failure. It just didn't make sense to sink the kind of money people were asking for into a console I wouldn't want to play. But then the stars aligned. I found a very reasonably priced unit pre-modded for VGA output with a palette swap option. The gaming gods were saying that now was the time to bite. At the moment, I have 3 Virtual Boy games that I'll be briefly talking about today. Going forward, we'll be checking in periodically as I add more to my collection. Also, although this is VGA modded, and it looks very nice on my TV, due to my setup, I've had to convert the video first to S-Video, which looks a fair bit worse, hoping to eventually find a better capture solution for this. For starters, there's Telero Boxer, which is easily the most interesting of the lot. This is a first-party boxing title which I've often heard compared to Punch-Out, but I don't think that comparison is all that apt. In theory, like Punch-Out, this is a boxing game that plays somewhat like a puzzle game, where you must figure out your opponent's tells, how to dodge and block appropriately, and when to counterattack. But in practice, Telero Boxer is far too complicated to allow for this. The game makes use of the Virtual Boy's unique double D-pad controller, so that you can control each of your arms independently, which is a neat gimmick but also requires a steep learning curve. And I do mean steep. I've completed this game 3 times and still don't have a complete grasp on it. How is that possible, you may ask? Well, the game is actually much easier than it initially appears. When I tried to beat the game the way the designers wanted me to, I came out the other side with over 100 losses to my name, only to be informed that I somehow needed to beat the whole thing without losing once to see the true ending. A task that seemed Herculean until I stopped treating the game like Punch-Out and just started mashing body blows on the more challenging opponents. The ending at least did feel worth it, with a very clever credit sequence and also a permadeath titled defense mode where a cat will kill you and say this. It's really unfortunate that the gameplay can ultimately be made so shallow, because I do think that the 2 D-pad arm gimmick is clever, and visually it's spectacular, with intricate sprites brimming with personality. If you're looking for my recommendation on this one for whatever reason, I'd overall say it's worth playing, but set your expectations appropriately. Next is V-Tetris, which should not be confused with 3D Tetris. V-Tetris is actually a Japanese exclusive and is pretty much your standard Tetris fare. The game comes courtesy of Bulletproof Software, who were sort of the face of Tetris in Japan, having released a version of the game for Famicom a year before Tengen or Nintendo, and releasing a steady stream of follow-ups until the late 90s. This version, as I said, is pretty standard. It skews a bit easy overall in my opinion, taking a long time for blocks to start falling with any speed, and I was even able to beat the hardest level in Mode B after only a few attempts. The most V thing about V-Tetris is Mode C, or Loop Tetris, which is basically Tetris but played on a cylinder that you can rotate at will. This can lead to some interesting scenarios where you can clear more than 4 lines at once, but overall it's not that compelling. Still, it is a version of Tetris, which means it's a certain amount of fun, so I guess it gets my recommendation, though I can't imagine playing this on the Virtual Boy's actual display for very long. Lastly, we have Virtual League Baseball, and I don't have much to say here. I don't care for sports games generally, and I care for baseball games least of all. But as far as these things go, I imagine it does a reasonable job. I have not fared well in what time I have put into it, lasting only a few innings before the game gets called, and I don't think I'll be putting in any more. I'm looking forward to exploring more of the library in the coming months. All the heavy hitters are still on the table, namely Mario Clash, Wario Land, and the extremely rare Jack Brothers. But I think the exciting thing is how well the Virtual Boy is performing so far with these comparatively less notable titles. Only time will tell if this trend will keep up.